She wasn't invited to the wedding to celebrate. She was invited to be tolerated. When Sky walked out in her bridesmaid dress, humiliated and shaking, she made one call she'd sworn she'd never make again. 60 seconds later, black cars surrounded the hotel. Not police, not family. A Korean Mafia boss had just answered her call, and he didn't come to talk. Welcome to Afro-KDrama Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. The glass shattered at Sky Coleman's feet. The sound split the rehearsal dinner cleanly. Conversation snapped off. Heads turned. Then the room adjusted. No one stepped forward. A waiter glanced at her stepmother, read the signal, and backed away. Laughter restarted too fast, polished and false, as if volume could erase discomfort. Sky didn't bend to clean it. Her bridesmaid dress pulled tight over her curves, altered wrong, chosen without her voice. Heat crawled up her spine. Across the table, Maya leaned into her fiancé, smiling, softly, fingers wrapped around his arm with quiet possession. The room followed her lead without hesitation. Her stepmother's eyes traveled over Sky's body, measuring, displeased, final. Too much, always too much. Sky turned and walked out. The terrace doors shut behind her, muting the noise. Cold air rushed in, sharp and cleansing. Soul stretched below in steel and light, vast and uninterested. She gripped the railing, breathing until the shake in her hands eased. Inside, applause erupted suddenly, loud, brittle, decisive. Something had been settled without her. Her phone vibrated. No message appeared, but she unlocked it anyway. Her thumb stopped on a contact she'd never erased. One word stared back at her, a warning she'd ignored for 3 months. That night had narrowed into an alley. Hands reached. Panic surged. Then violence arrived, swift and controlled. When it ended, he stood between her and the world, coat settling around her shoulders, eyes unreadable. His fingers checked her face slowly, deliberately, as if her safety outweighed everything else. The memory tightened her chest. Back on the terrace, laughter floated out again. Maya's laugh. Bright. Certain. Something inside Sky broke clean. She pressed call. The line opened instantly. No greeting, no sound, just presence. Focused and absolute. Somewhere across the city, direction changed. Meetings ended mid-sentence. Engines turned. She felt it lock into place behind her ribs, electric and heavy. She leaned forward, breath uneven, and made the request she'd sworn she never would. The call ended. Regret tried to surface. It arrived too late. 60 seconds later, her phone lit up. One message, short, commanding. Below, black vehicles slid into formation on wet pavement. Doors opened in sequence. Men moved with precision. The street adjusted around them. Sky stayed where she was. Inside the hotel, the atmosphere fractured. Staff redirected guests. Security sealed exits. Maya's smile collapsed. Someone important realized control had already shifted. Footsteps approached from behind the terrace doors. Unhurried, certain, unafraid. Sky straightened, heart hammering, as the air thickened with authority, danger, and a pull she no longer fought. The night had chosen, and it was done pretending she had a way back. The morning arrived without permission. Sky woke before the light finished rising, alert in the way you get when your body knows it's no longer living by its own rules. The room around her was quiet, expensive, deliberate. Nothing out of place, nothing personal. Even the air felt managed. She sat up slowly, heart steady but watchful. The bed wasn't hers. The view wasn't hers. The life she'd stepped into last night had already begun moving without asking what she wanted from it. Her phone rested on the table beside her, charged to 100%. No missed calls, no messages. That bothered her more than restraints would. Have. She crossed the room barefoot, testing the floor, the silence, the door. Unlocked. Of course it was. Whoever controlled this place didn't need locks to keep her where she was. Memory returned in fragments, the hotel shrinking behind tinted glass, the city bending open. His presence beside her in the car, close enough to feel, distant enough to hurt. He hadn't touched her. He'd let the tension do the work instead. Later that morning, a knock sounded. One clean rap, not asking. A woman stood outside with a garment bag and a cup of coffee. Steam curled from the lid. Sky took it automatically. The woman's eyes flicked to Sky's face, assessing. Then she stepped back and left without a word. The dress inside the bag was black and simple, cut with intention, not hiding her curves, not exaggerating them, just fitting her as if someone had studied her shape and decided she deserved precision. Sky exhaled slowly. Attention like that was never casual. She wore it anyway. By midday, a car waited downstairs. No driver in sight. The door opened the moment she paused. She hesitated long enough to remind herself she still had agency, then slid inside. The city moved differently through the window now. Traffic parted. Signals changed early. People stepped aside without knowing why. She felt seen without being looked at. The car stopped at a building she'd passed 100 times without noticing. Inside, sound dropped in stages. Conversations thinned. Men shifted subtly, eyes tracking her with something between curiosity and caution. The space bent around her presence as if it had already been claimed. He wasn't there. She was led to a table set for two. One chair remained empty. The message was clear enough. She ate slowly, refusing to rush, refusing to apologize with her posture. Eyes followed every movement. No one spoke to her. No one challenged her either. That night ended the same way it began. Silence, control, distance. By the end of the week, patterns emerged. Clothes appeared. Routes cleared. People learned when to speak and when not to. Her world narrowed and sharpened at the same time. Still no direct contact. Still no explanations. His absence became its own kind of presence, heavy and deliberate. Desire crept in where anger should have lived. A few days later, she tested the edge. She left without the car, melted into the crowd. For 3 blocks, nothing happened. Then the street tightened. Phones lifted, murmurs spread. Men appeared from nowhere, not rough, not kind, guiding her back with hands that never quite touched. That night, a message arrived. One line, calm, certain. A reminder of whose attention she now carried. She didn't answer. The following evening, the balcony door stood open. The city rushed in, loud and alive. On the railing lay his coat, folded neatly, not forgotten, placed. She touched the fabric and felt heat climb her spine. This wasn't restraint, it was invitation. And it scared her how much she wanted to accept. That evening, Sky saw him up close for the first time since the night she called. He didn't arrive loudly. He didn't need to. The room reacted before her eyes did. Conversations softened. Bodies shifted. Attention aligned. By the time she looked up from her glass, he was already there, seated across from her as if the space had been waiting. Yong-Soo Baek. The name moved through her like recognition instead of information. He wore black, tailored and effortless, his presence controlled to the point of restraint. His gaze settled on her face and stayed there, steady and unflinching, as if the week apart had been a test she'd passed. Sky felt the pull immediately, a tight, dangerous awareness that started in her chest and sank lower, unwelcome and impossible to ignore. She didn't look away. Later that night, they shared the same car, not touching, close enough to feel heat through fabric. Every turn pressed her thigh against his, for half a second too long. He didn't move away. He didn't move closer. The restraint was deliberate, sharpened by intent. Sky caught her breath once and felt his attention sharpen instantly, like a blade responding to pressure. She hated that he noticed everything. The following morning, she found a note waiting with her coffee. Not instructions, not reassurance. A single sentence that acknowledged her choice to walk the street alone the day before. Not angry, not indulgent, observant. Her pulse jumped. He hadn't stopped her. He'd watched. By midday, the city felt different again. She walked freely, but doors opened faster. People stepped aside without knowing why. When a man lingered too long at a cafe, eyes sliding over her body, Skye felt it before it happened. The shift. The man stiffened, glanced past her, and left without finishing his drink. Her stomach tightened. That night, Young-soo stood beside her on the balcony. The city roared below. Wind tugged at her hair. His presence was close now, undeniable, his arm resting against the railing inches from hers. She could smell him, clean, dark, controlled. The scent dragged memory and want through her all at once. He didn't touch her. That was worse. She felt his attention trace her face, her shoulders, the curve of her waist without contact. Skye turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze. The moment stretched, heavy with things neither of them said. His eyes flicked to her mouth for half a second, then back up. The restraint in him felt physical, like a muscle held tight. Skye swallowed. A few days later, jealousy arrived without warning. At a private event, a man approached her, confident, smiling too easily. He stood too close, asked questions he hadn't earned the right to ask. Skye answered politely, distant, already planning her exit. The reaction was immediate. The room cooled. The man faltered mid-sentence, glanced over her shoulder, and went pale. He stepped back, muttered an apology she hadn't requested, and disappeared into the crowd. Skye turned slowly. Young-soo stood across the room, eyes locked on hers. Not angry, possessive. The look sent heat straight through her, dangerous and thrilling. He wasn't hiding it anymore. That night, when they were alone again, he finally closed the distance. Not a touch, just proximity. Close enough that her breath hitched. Close enough that walking away would have cost her something real. Skye held her ground, and Young-soo smiled, just slightly, as if he'd been waiting for that resistance all along. Morning came with movement. Skye left the apartment alone. No escort appeared. No car followed too closely. The city accepted her back with noise and impatience, vendors shouting, buses sighing, life continuing as if nothing had shifted. She walked until her shoulders loosened and her breath evened out. At work, emails waited, deadlines, a meeting rescheduled without explanation, a client suddenly compliant. Power brushed her day without announcing itself. She noticed the way people listened longer, the way decisions landed faster when she spoke. It unsettled her how easily she adapted. By noon, a delivery arrived. Lunch she hadn't ordered. Her favorite. Still hot. No note. Her phone stayed silent. The restraint felt intentional, like a hand hovering inches from skin. That evening, she met friends she hadn't seen in weeks. Laughter returned, lighter this time. When a man slid into the empty seat beside her, confident and curious, Skye felt interest stir. He complimented her smile. He leaned closer. Across the room, conversation dipped. Skye sensed it before she saw it. The man's posture stiffened. His gaze slid past her, caught, then broke. He laughed awkwardly, stood, and left without explanation. The table exhaled. Skye didn't. Her pulse quickened, heat blooming with irritation and something darker. Later that night, a message arrived, not possessive, not tender, observant. It referenced the restaurant, the time, the man's jacket. Proof of distance without absence. Her chest tightened despite herself. The following day, she pushed back. She skipped the routes that opened for her. She stayed late at work. She tested edges. Nothing snapped. Nothing stopped her. Control held, elastic and patient. By the end of the week, she understood the game. He wasn't containing her. He was matching her pace, step for step, letting her choose how far to go before he closed distance. The realization was intoxicating and frightening in equal measure. On Saturday afternoon, she walked into a crowded market. Hands brushed her arm, voices pressed close. For a moment, fear flared sharp and old. It passed. Space opened around her without a word. The crowd shifted subtly, clearing a path she hadn't asked for. She stopped, heart pounding, and finally looked straight ahead. At the far end of the street, he stood in plain sight. No shadows, no spectacle, just certainty. His gaze held hers across the noise and color and movement of the city. Skye took one step toward him and smiled. The choice felt reckless and clear. She didn't hurry. She let the distance shrink on its own terms. People glanced, then looked away. He didn't move until she was close enough to feel warmth. The market kept breathing around them. For once, nothing else mattered. Skye lifted her chin, steady and unafraid, and realized she wasn't being pulled anymore. She was walking forward because she wanted to. The risk thrilled her. The unknown burned bright, and she understood that from this moment, retreat would cost more than staying, with him watching, waiting, and letting her decide. By the next morning, the city felt closer. Skye noticed it the moment she stepped outside, not watched, not followed, just aware. Doors opened a beat earlier. People moved aside without knowing why. The sense of being carried by a current she hadn't stepped into on her. Own tightened around her ribs. At work, her supervisor pulled her aside. A new account. A sudden promotion conversation that hadn't existed last week. Skye listened, nodded, accepted nothing yet. Opportunity had a different weight now. She wondered how much of it was hers and how much belonged to the gravity she'd walked toward in the market. At lunch, she sat alone and let her phone lie untouched on the table. It stayed quiet. That silence pressed harder than any message would have. She hated how much she wanted proof he was still paying attention. That evening, rain came down hard and fast. She walked anyway, letting it soak her hair, her jacket, her thoughts. When she reached her apartment, someone was waiting inside the lobby. Not him, a woman, calm, impeccably dressed. She nodded once, respectful, then handed Skye an envelope and walked away without explanation. Inside the envelope was an address and a time. No demand, no signature. Skye stared at it for a long moment. Then she folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. Later that night, the address led her to a quiet restaurant tucked between two buildings she'd passed 100 times without noticing. Inside, the lighting was low and warm. No crowd. One table set. He was already there. This time, he stood when she approached. Up close, his presence felt heavier, denser, like standing near something that generated its own weather. His eyes moved over her slowly, openly, not hiding the approval that flickered there before he reined it back in. Skye felt it like a touch anyway. She sat. They ate without hurry. The silence wasn't empty. It stretched, tightened, hummed. Every small movement mattered. The brush of fingers near a glass. The way his gaze lingered when she leaned back. The way he noticed when her knee bounced once, then stilled. When the meal ended, he didn't reach for her. He rose, paid, and waited. That restraint scraped at her nerves. She followed him out into the rain. They walked side by side, close but not touching. The city thinned around them. When a man stumbled too close, Yongsu's presence shifted, subtle and immediate. The man veered away without ever looking up. Skye felt the protection settle around her like heat. At the corner, they stopped. This time, he didn't look away. The space between them tightened until it hurt. His hand lifted, paused, then dropped again. The choice hovered there, unspoken and sharp. Skye stepped closer on her own, not touching, just close enough to feel his breath change. Something in his expression fractured for half a second. Relief, hunger, control snapping back into place. He leaned in, stopping just short of her mouth. Skye closed her eyes before she could stop herself. The moment broke when his phone buzzed. He pulled back immediately, jaw tightening, attention snapping elsewhere. The shift was instant. The world intruded. Danger reasserted itself. Skye opened her eyes and saw it. The edge, the weight, the cost of standing this close to him. He looked at her again, softer now, and nodded once. A promise, or a warning. He stepped away. Sky stood in the rain long after he was gone, heart racing, skin buzzing, aware that whatever line they'd crossed couldn't be uncrossed. The attraction wasn't safe anymore. It was tied to power, to risk, to things that would demand payment. And she knew, with a clarity that scared her, that she wasn't walking away. 2 days later, the city stopped pretending. Sky felt it before she understood it. The quiet around her sharpened, not empty, alert. When she left her building, a car idled across the street longer than necessary. When she crossed an intersection, a man turned his head too slowly. She didn't panic. She noted. Fear had learned better timing. At work, an unfamiliar face waited near the elevators, polite, curious, watching her reflection in the glass instead of her eyes. By the time she reached her floor, he was gone. Her phone stayed silent. That bothered her more than a warning would have. By evening, rain returned, heavy, relentless. She took a longer route home, cutting through a narrow street lined with closed shops. Halfway down, footsteps echoed behind her. One set, then another. Her shoulders tightened. She didn't turn. A car rolled up ahead and stopped. Engine low, door opened. Yong-soo stepped out. No rush, no raised voice, just presence. The men behind her slowed, recalculated, disappeared as if they'd never been there. The street exhaled. Sky stopped walking. He crossed the distance with controlled speed, eyes scanning her first, then the shadows. When he reached her, his hand lifted, paused, then settled lightly at her elbow, not gripping, guiding. The contact sent heat straight through her, unwelcome and grounding at the same time. They moved together toward the car. She didn't resist. She didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. Inside, silence pressed close. Rain streaked the windows. Yong-soo sat beside her, attention split between the street and her face. When his gaze returned to her fully, it lingered. He looked relieved, angry, focused, all at once. She met his eyes steady. The car pulled away. Later, they stood in the apartment kitchen, the city humming beyond the glass. He removed his jacket and draped it over the chair, movements economical. Sky noticed the faint mark along his wrist, old and pale. The scar felt intimate simply because she'd seen it. He poured water, offered it without a word. She took it. Their fingers brushed. Electricity flared sharp and fast. He didn't pull back immediately. Neither did she. The moment stretched. Yong-soo stepped back first, jaw tight, restraint obvious. He moved to the window, scanning the street below, control reasserting itself. Sky watched him, chest tight with a mix of gratitude and frustration she didn't try to untangle. By the end of the night, the rules shifted. He didn't stay. He didn't explain. But when he left, 2 men remained in the building lobby, pretending to check their phones. The door clicked shut behind him, and Sky leaned back against it, breath unsteady. Sleep came late. The following morning, a message arrived. Not protective, not possessive, informative, names, times. A reminder that someone had been watching and would try again. Sky dressed with care. Not armor, intention. That afternoon, she chose to go out anyway. At a gallery opening, conversation flowed, wine poured, music softened edges. She laughed when she wanted to. She stayed when she could have left. Eyes followed her, some curious, some calculating. She felt the tension hum beneath it all. Across the room, Yong-soo appeared without announcement. This time, he didn't intervene. He watched. When a man spoke too close, Yong-soo's gaze sharpened. When Sky stepped away on her own, something like approval crossed his face. Pride, maybe, or relief. They didn't touch. They didn't speak. But the space between them tightened, charged with trust and danger, and something deeper forming under pressure. Sky understood then. Protection wasn't the point anymore. Choice was. And tonight she intended to use it. The next morning arrived with consequences. Sky woke to her phone vibrating against the nightstand, sharp and insistent. One message, coordinates, a time an hour away. No pressure, no explanation. The restraint threaded through it made her pulse quicken. She stared at the screen, then rolled out of bed and dressed without hesitation. Outside, the city felt alert again, not hostile, expectant. She took a taxi instead of the car that usually waited, watching reflections slide across the window. When they arrived, the street was quiet in the way that meant someone had decided it would be. The building looked ordinary. Inside, it wasn't. Yong-soo waited near the windows, jacket off, sleeves rolled, posture relaxed in a way that suggested nothing here could surprise him. When he looked up, his attention locked onto her completely. The intensity landed like a hand at her waist, steadying and unsettling all at once. She stopped a few steps away and didn't speak. She didn't need to. He took her in slowly, openly. Approval clear and unhidden this time. It warmed her, dangerous and undeniable. He moved closer, stopping just inside her space, close enough that she could feel his heat, close enough that walking away would feel like loss. He handed her a folder. Inside were photographs, times, faces she didn't recognize. One image showed her in the market, another showed the gallery. The realization settled cold and sharp. Someone had been mapping her life. Yong-soo's gaze stayed on her face, watching the moment it landed. He didn't soften it. He let her see the truth. Sky closed the folder and met his eyes. The fear was there, but so was something else. Resolve, bright and defiant. She didn't step back. She stepped closer. His breath changed, just slightly. Enough. They stood there, tension tightening, attraction pressed up against danger until it felt like the same thing. His hand lifted again, hovering near her arm, then dropped. Control reclaimed, not absence. Choice. Later, they moved through the building together. Rooms opened, men nodded. Conversations stopped when he passed. Sky felt the pull of his world, the weight of it pressing against her shoulder as if asking a question. By afternoon, the city buzzed with rumors she couldn't hear but could feel. Phones rang and went unanswered. Cars rerouted. Somewhere, someone was being disappointed. Somewhere else, someone was being warned. They didn't touch. That evening, he walked her home. Not to the door, just to the block. He stopped under a streetlight and turned to her, expression unreadable, but intent. The distance between them narrowed until it felt like breath could bridge it. Sky lifted her hand and rested it briefly against his chest. Solid, warm, real. The contact was innocent and devastating. His jaw tightened. His hand came up, covering hers for half a second before he pulled away, restraint snapping back into place. He stepped back, eyes dark, and inclined his head once, a promise she felt more than understood. When he left, Sky stood there, heart racing, aware that desire had fused itself to danger so completely she could no longer tell them apart. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, smiling despite herself. Tomorrow would ask for more, and she knew she would give it. The following day refused to stay quiet. Sky sensed it before anything happened. The stillness outside her apartment felt staged, like a held breath. She went through her morning routine anyway, forcing normalcy into small motions. Coffee poured, shoes tied, jacket zipped. When she stepped outside, the street looked ordinary. It wasn't. At the corner, a car rolled past too slowly. At the cafe, a man checked his phone without drinking. At work, security lingered near the elevators longer than necessary. None of it crossed into threat. All of it pressed close enough to be felt. Her phone stayed silent. By afternoon, tension sat just under her skin. She left early, choosing the bus instead of a car, letting herself blend. The crowd swallowed her for a few stops. For a moment, she felt almost free. Then the bus braked hard. A commotion up front, raised voices. Sky's grip tightened on the pole. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She felt the shift ripple through the bus, the way awareness sharpened when danger entered a space. The doors opened. Yong-soo stepped on, not rushed, not scanning, certain. The noise dropped a fraction. A man near the back stiffened, eyes darting. Yong-soo didn't look at him. He moved down the aisle and stopped beside Sky, close enough that his presence blocked her from the rest of the bus. His hand came up, resting lightly at her back. Not possessive, protective. The contact steadied her instantly, warmth bleeding through fabric. The man at the back stood too fast, spoke too loud, stepped off at the next stop without looking back. The doors closed. Yong-soo didn't move his hand. Sky turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. Something passed between them, relief, anger, heat. He looked down at her like he'd arrived just in time and hated that he'd had to. The ride ended 2 stops later. They got off together. He didn't ask where she was going. He already knew. Outside, rain began again, light but insistent. They walked side by side. No rush, no distance. The street thinned around them without effort. When they reached her building, he stopped at the curb. This time, she didn't wait. Sky stepped closer, tilting her face up. The air tightened. His breath hitched, barely, but she felt it. He didn't touch her. He held the moment with visible restraint. Eyes, dark, jaw set. Her hand lifted, resting against his chest again, solid, steady, alive. His hand covered hers, firmer this time, thumb pressing once as if grounding himself. He leaned down, stopping just short of her mouth, close enough that the space between them burned. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but want. Then his phone vibrated. The spell snapped. He pulled back, control slamming into place. He looked past her, scanning the street, then back to her face. Concern, frustration, resolve. He spoke quietly to someone on the phone, then ended the call and looked at her again. The intensity softened, just slightly, into something that made her chest ache. He nodded once. Tonight wouldn't be safe. Sky nodded back. She watched him leave, rain swallowing his shape, and went upstairs with her pulse still racing. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, breath uneven, mind sharp. This wasn't about protection anymore. It was about choosing to stand where the danger was because the pull toward him had become stronger than fear. And tomorrow, the danger wouldn't wait. The night didn't give her time to settle. Sky woke just after midnight to the sound of her phone vibrating across the table, sharp and urgent. One message, a single word, now. Her pulse spiked, clarity slicing through sleep. She dressed fast, hands steady despite the adrenaline humming under her skin. Outside, the street was already waiting. A car idled at the curb, engine low, patient. The door opened as she approached. Inside, Yong-soo sat alone. No jacket, sleeves rolled. His gaze lifted to her face and held there, intense and searching, as if he'd been counting seconds. The city blurred as they moved. They stopped at a place that didn't exist on any map Sky knew. Concrete, steel, quiet. Inside, tension snapped tight. Men stood aside without looking at her directly, their respect aimed at him but brushing her all the same. She felt it, the danger humming, awake and close. Yong-soo didn't touch her as they walked. He stayed just close enough that she could feel his heat. When they entered a private room, the door shut behind them with a soft, final sound. For a moment, neither moved. He studied her like he was committing her to memory under pressure. The defiance in her posture, the way her chin stayed lifted, the way her pulse betrayed her anyway. His expression shifted, something raw flickering before control locked back in place. He stepped closer. Sky's breath caught, not from fear, from the weight of being chosen in this way, pulled into the center instead of pushed to the edges. His hand lifted, stopping inches from her waist, hovering there as if asking a question he wouldn't voice. She answered by stepping forward. The space vanished. His hand settled at her waist, firm and grounding, thumb pressing once like a promise he could barely contain. Heat rushed through her, intense and dizzying. She rested her hands. against his chest, feeling the steady power beneath, the restraint trembling there. For a second, the world narrowed to breath and closeness and want. Then a shout echoed from somewhere beyond the walls. Yong-soo stilled instantly. His hand dropped. His attention snapped outward, razor sharp. The danger surged back in, undeniable. He moved her behind him without hesitation, body angling to shield her as voices rose, quick and urgent. Sky's heart pounded, but she didn't pull away. Men rushed past the doorway. Orders flew low and fast. The air changed, thick with consequence. Yong-soo turned back to her, eyes dark and intent, urgency cutting through the restraint. This was the cost. He leaned in, close enough that his forehead brushed hers. The contact was brief, controlled, but it hit harder than anything else had. Reassurance, claim, apology, all at once. Then he was gone. The door opened, closed, locked. Sky stood alone, breath shaking, hands still warm from where he'd touched her. Outside, movement thundered through the building. Somewhere, something had gone wrong. Somewhere else, lines were being crossed. She pressed her palm to her chest and felt the echo of him there, steady and fierce. This wasn't fantasy anymore. It was war pressing in from all sides, and she was standing in the middle of it because she had chosen to step forward instead of back. Whatever happened next would demand everything. And she knew, with a calm that surprised her, that she wasn't leaving his side when it did. The lock clicked into place behind him, and the silence hit harder than the noise outside. Sky stood where he'd left her, pulse pounding, the room too still, too clean for what was unfolding beyond its walls. Voices echoed faintly through concrete corridors. Footsteps ran. Orders snapped low and sharp. Whatever line had been crossed tonight, it wasn't small. She moved to the window and saw nothing but darkness and rain-slicked streets. Below, no sirens, no chaos. Control wrapped tight around the building like a lid. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. A short message. Stay inside. Do not open the door. She obeyed, not out of fear, but because she trusted the urgency behind it. Minutes stretched, then an hour. The sounds thinned, then stopped. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't him. Two men entered quietly, faces impassive, and checked the room without touching anything. One nodded to her, respectful, distant. They left as silently as they'd come. Sky sank onto the edge of the chair, breath shaky. She pressed her palms together, grounding herself. This was real now. Whatever she'd stepped into had teeth. By morning, the city pretended nothing had happened. She was driven back to her apartment before sunrise. The street looked ordinary. People jogged, shops opened. Seoul swallowed the night whole. Inside her apartment, everything was exactly as she'd left it. The normality felt unreal. Her phone buzzed again just after she showered. A single line. Later today. She didn't reply. At work, eyes lingered longer. Conversation stopped when she passed. No one said anything directly, but something had shifted. She felt it in the way doors opened before she reached them, in the way a meeting ended early without explanation. Power brushed her life again, subtle and invasive. That evening, she waited. He came after dark, not announced, not rushed. The knock was soft, controlled. When she opened the door, Yong-soo stood there alone. His gaze swept over her quickly, checking, cataloging, relief flickering before it disappeared. Up close, he looked tired, not weak, worn sharp. They stood in the doorway for a moment too long. The tension returned instantly, thicker now, threaded with what had almost been lost. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The apartment felt smaller with him in it. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His attention held her steady as he moved through the space, checking windows, doors, corners. When he finished, he turned back to her, expression unreadable. She stepped closer first. His breath changed, just slightly. She rested her hand against his chest again, feeling his heart beat strong and sure beneath her palm. This time, He didn't pull away. His hand came up to her waist, firm and grounding, thumb pressing once like a vow he wasn't ready to speak. They stayed like that, close, silent, connected by everything that hadn't been said. Later that night, he left before dawn. The next few days tightened like a drawn wire. Sky returned to routine, but the routine bent around her. She noticed the way strangers glanced twice, the way men stepped aside without knowing why. When she laughed with friends, she felt eyes tracking her through the crowd. Protection stayed close, unseen but present. Messages came once a day, brief, informational. No tenderness, no commands, just enough to remind her. She was not forgotten. She pushed back where she could, took longer routes, stayed out late, tested how far the invisible perimeter stretched. It stretched with her. A few days later, the danger stopped circling. It came straight on. Sky was leaving work when the street shifted. The usual hum dulled. A car idled where it shouldn't. Another blocked the intersection ahead. Her instincts flared hard and fast. She didn't hesitate. She turned and walked back into the building. Too late. Hands closed around her arm from behind. Rough, urgent. The panic hit sharp and old. She twisted, fought, felt herself pulled toward the curb. Then everything exploded. The grip vanished. Bodies collided. Someone hit the pavement hard. Sky staggered back, heart in her throat, as Yongsu stepped into view like a force of nature unleashed. He moved with brutal efficiency, ending the threat in seconds. No hesitation, no mercy. When it was over, the street went quiet. He turned to her immediately. His hands framed her face, checking, careful despite the violence still humming in him. The concern in his eyes stripped something raw open in her chest. She reached up and grabbed his wrists, grounding herself in him. He pulled her into his arms without restraint this time. The embrace was fierce, protective, claiming. Sky pressed into him, breath shaking, relief and desire crashing together. She felt his heartbeat under her cheek, fast and real. This was it, the choice made. He held her until the street resumed breathing, then guided her into the car, his hand never leaving her back. As the door closed, Sky realized with calm certainty that whatever came next, war, fallout, exposure, she was already in too deep to pretend she wanted out. And for the first time, that didn't scare her at all. If you're feeling this tension, don't disappear, like subscribe and stay with me for what comes next. The aftermath didn't slow. It hardened. Sky woke to news alerts buzzing across her phone, none of them naming what had happened, all of them circling it. Traffic disruption downtown, unconfirmed altercation, police presence brief, then gone. The city absorbed violence the way it always did, by refusing to look too closely. Her body remembered everything anyway, the way his arms had locked around her, the weight of his protection, the certainty in it. She dressed slowly, choosing comfort over armor, and stepped outside. The car was already there. This time she didn't hesitate. They drove in silence. The tension between them had changed shape, no longer circling, now fused. When they reached his penthouse, he finally spoke. Not with words, but with action. He stopped her just inside the door, hands firm at her waist, eyes searching her face like he needed to see that she was real. She lifted her chin, didn't look away. The kiss came then, inevitable and controlled, a collision held back just enough to burn. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't gentle, it was grounding, claiming, and careful all at once. When he pulled back, his forehead rested briefly against hers, breath uneven. The message was clear, you are not collateral. Later, as daylight faded, he showed her the edge of his world without glamour. Rooms meant for planning, screens alive with movement, men who deferred without question. She wasn't hidden, she wasn't paraded. She was placed beside him, and that distinction mattered. By nightfall, word reached them. The threat wasn't over. It had shifted. Retaliation was coming. Sky didn't flinch. The following week tested everything. Yongsu moved like a storm. Contained, meetings ending abruptly, alliances tightening, rivals going silent. Sky watched it all from close enough to feel the pressure, far enough to stay untouched. She learned the rhythm of his life quickly, the cost of every decision, the restraint it took not to pull her deeper. Their connection sharpened under it. Moments stolen in hallways, a hand at her lower back guiding her through crowds. The way his gaze tracked her even when he pretended to focus elsewhere. Desire lived in the pauses, in what he refused to take when he could have. Jealousy arrived uninvited. At a charity event, a man approached Sky with practiced charm, eyes lingering too long. Young-soo's response was immediate and terrifyingly calm. He didn't interrupt. He didn't glare. He simply stepped into Sky's space, hand resting possessively at her waist, presence cutting the air clean. The man retreated within seconds. Later, alone, Young-soo's control fractured. His hands slid into her hair, his breath heavy against her neck as he fought himself. Sky felt the depth of it then, not ownership, but fear of loss. She turned in his arms and kissed him again, slow and sure, choosing him deliberately. That night, danger struck elsewhere. A warehouse burned, a message sent in fire and smoke. Young-soo left before dawn, jaw set, eyes dark with resolve. Sky watched him go, heart steady despite the fear. She trusted him to come back. He did, not unscathed but victorious. The city whispered for days after. Power shifted, lines redrew themselves. When Young-soo returned to her, exhaustion clung to him like smoke. Sky didn't ask questions. She didn't need answers. She met him at the door and pulled him close, grounding him the way he always grounded her. This time, he didn't stop the intimacy. They disappeared into the quiet of the penthouse. The world held at bay. Touch became communication, reassurance, promise. The night softened only for them, then tightened. Again when morning came. Weeks passed. The threat receded, replaced by something more dangerous, normalcy. Sky moved in without ceremony. Her clothes filled his closet. Her laughter lived in his kitchen. Her presence rewired the space, turning power into something warmer, steadier. Young-soo watched it happen with awe he never tried to hide. The proposal came quietly. No spectacle. Just him, serious and unguarded, placing the future in her hands. Sky said yes without hesitation, the certainty ringing louder than fear ever had. Their wedding was small and private, attended by those who mattered and guarded by those who knew better. Sky walked toward him with her head high, choosing him again in front of the world. Pregnancy came quietly. No dramatic moment, just a slow realization that settled into certainty. Sky told him one morning over coffee, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Young-soo froze, mug, halfway to his lips, eyes widening before softening into something raw and unguarded. He set the mug down carefully and pulled her into his arms. The emotion that moved through him wasn't fear, it was awe. A deep, reverent understanding of what this meant. Responsibility layered with joy, power reshaped into protection that no longer needed an audience. The months that followed rewrote everything. Young-soo became meticulous in new ways, not controlling, careful. He listened when Sky insisted on independence, walked beside her instead of ahead of her, learned when to let go. The city noticed the shift. His men noticed it too. Leadership changed shape when it was anchored by something worth coming home to. Sky carried herself differently as her body changed. Stronger, more grounded. She refused to disappear into safety, refused to be hidden. Young-soo supported that choice even when it scared him. Trust ran both ways now. The day their child arrived, the city held its breath. Not because of danger, but because something had completed its arc. Young-soo stood beside Sky through every moment, his grip steady, his presence unwavering. When he finally held their child, the world narrowed completely. Power, violence, reputation, All of it faded in the face of that small, breathing proof of what they had built. Years later, Sky would look back on that balcony at dawn, Yongsu's arms around her, their child asleep inside, and understand something with perfect clarity. Love hadn't erased the danger, it had given it meaning. The city still pulsed below them, alive and unpredictable. But they stood above it now, not untouched, not naive, simply aligned, partners, chosen, bound by a loyalty that had been tested, broken open, and rebuilt stronger. Sky leaned back into Yongsu, his hand resting warm and sure over hers, and smiled. The night had once chosen for her. Now, every morning, she chose back. If you stayed with this story all the way to the end, you're part of it now. This wasn't just about danger or romance. It was about choice, power, and standing your ground when everything is at stake. If you felt the tension, the loyalty, the pull between fear and desire, don't let it end here. Like this video so it reaches more people who love stories like this. Subscribe so you don't miss the next world, the next risk, the next obsession. And tell me in the comments, at what moment did you realize there was no turning back?